Hello and welcome to Game Changing with me, Tim Thornton.
And me, Chris Sheldon.
In this podcast, we chat to various luminaries from the music world who we've met along the way.
About those key moments in their careers where the stars aligned and it all started to go right.
Every so often, one comes across a producer who's had such a close relationship with a band, they almost feel more like an additional band member. Recently, Chris and I were lucky enough to chat to Stephen Street, whose long association with Blur takes in 4 of their #1 albums, including the career-defining Parklife, plus what could be arguably described as the very first Britpop album, Modern Life is Rubbish. But Stephen's baptism of fire came long before that, when, in the 1980s, he managed to become the engineer of choice for one of the most iconic indie bands of all, The Smiths. Hope you enjoy the conversation, which we join as the 3 of us discuss the decline of the proper London recording studio.
It was my studio choice to go to for a while because it's a proper studio. I mean, there's so few of them around now.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of old, warehouses that have been converted into studios.
Yeah, yeah.
Things like that. You know what I mean? They're not. It's a proper
exactly
built studio,
Yeah.
and that's what I liked about it.
And that's where you started then, Steve, that kind of studio. That was.
Well, I first started at Island Records, and Island Records, the actual record label, was based in St. Peter's Square in Hammersmith. And they had a basement studio, because back in the day, back in the 70s, most record companies did have a studio of their own. But Island had even more. They had Basing Street Studios, you know, the one,
became Psalm.
yeah, which became Psalm. And they also had this basement studio, which was mainly used for demoing bands and things that they were thinking of signing, or doing mixes of stuff that was signed to the label, but they wanted to do a better mix or something. I think Bob Marley had recorded there. I think at some time in the 70s.
Yeah.
I think some of the Exodus album was done there.
So when did you start there?
I started there about 83, 84,
Okay.
I think. It's a little bit vague now, but about 83, 84. And what happened was I was a musician in the band, and the band I was in, you know, we got a record deal, but nothing really much happened, to be honest with you. It was kind of around about that time, the two-tone ska thing that was going on and so on. And basically I got to the point in the band where it was kind of slowly falling apart, and I thought, well, one thing I know that I really did enjoy when I was in the band was the recording side of it. And like a lot of people who bought records a lot back in the 70s, I used to read the record sleeves inside out, you know, to kind of know, and I'd kind of get to know all these names of people that I kind of. Well, Visconti was the first one, obviously, with Bowie and Bone and all the records I bought, you know. But then, you know, as time went on, you know, you had that kind of initial post-punk period as well. You know, you had people like Steve Lillywhite, John Leckie, Martin Russian, and you kind of get to know, you think, well, there's a few guys that are really good engineers, and they're getting the chance to kind of progress into production. And I thought, well, I'm a bass player in the band, you know, it's not got anywhere, but if I can use that musical knowledge and then tie that in with actually if I can learn how to use a recording desk, then perhaps I could try and follow the same path. You know, I kind of wrote to all the studios as one day, you know, you got the directory out and you write, and hardly anyone bothers replying. And I wasn't really getting anywhere at first. And then actually, funny enough, I had an interview for a job at Battery. So I went for an interview there, and it was okay, but I got the impression it was quite a hard rock studio at the time.
Right.
That's not really my bag, but I was going to take the job if it was the only thing available.
Yeah.
But anyway, I remember kind of talking with Jeremy Green, who was very helpful. He was the guy that engineered the Clash.
I was going to say, he did Specials, didn't he?
He was at Wessex, yeah. And he said to me, I think Island Records are looking for someone. You might want to give them a try. And I went, you know, do you mean Basing Street? He said, no, I think it's in the label. And it was true. They were refitting the Fallout Shelter, which was this basement studio. And they were looking for a new young assistant to come in and help them do the final bit of fitting out and then, you know, become like the new assistant. So I phoned them at Island. I said, look, I live in Fulham, I can be up this afternoon. I said, I have been offered another job, but I'd rather work for Island than work for you guys, and you know, is there any chance I can come and see you today? And they went, yeah, we should be able to fit you in. So I managed to talk my way into an interview there, and I think my enthusiasm rubbed off because they offered me the job. So I got the job the following week, and
so
my first job was varnishing the woodwork that was going on.
I was going to say, you were a proper runner when you started.
Yeah, when I first started, I was, you know... But then again, I was the only assistant there, so really... and at the time, there were a couple of really good engineers working there, Goblin Logie and Paul Groucho Smigel, guys that were doing, kind of reggae productions and kind of stuff like that. So, which I always loved that kind of music anyway. So I was really the only assistant for quite a while there. So it was quite intensive training.
Yeah.
So I wasn't just like a T-boy. I actually managed to get my hands on, setting up the delays and things and so on, and getting a feel for the desk. It was an old MCI desk.
That's great that they got you in.
Yeah, they did. They were very, very encouraging, and so I can progress pretty quickly at Ireland. It was a good place to be, it really was.
Because I was looking in your sort of discography, you were doing bands like Black Uhura and...
Yeah, well, I was assisting Groucho, or as he was known, Paul Smigel.
Right.
He had kind of, nickname Groucho. And yeah, so basically I'll be doing a lot of that kind of assisting and stuff. And I always remember working on a dub album with Groucho, and basically, he would just fire off all these different dubs, and then the next day I'd be like editing the half-inch, trying to get, like some shape to the... because obviously you just fire off more than you need.
Yeah.
You kind of use the best bits, with
like doing the old 12 inches
right,
and stuff.
and kind of so on. So I really learnt my chops kind of editing quite quickly, which came in useful for later on when I was doing my own productions and things, obviously, because sometimes I was editing the multi-track, when it came to things I was working on. So it was good, it was good intensive training, and I really enjoyed it. But like everything, you need that right place, right time buzz. So I was in the right place, right time to get the job. And then also I was in the right place at the right time to have a break while I was working at Ireland. That gave me the thing of working with the Smiths.
Right. Had they worked there before then?
Well, no, I mean, so basically by this time I had progressed to being in one of the in-house engineers, but still one of the more junior ones, but I was able to, handle a session myself. I'd learned how to set up microphones and so on. And at this point, Ireland had just changed the MCI desk and put in an SSL. And they were keen to get a bit of money in to help pay for that investment that they'd made. So they were beginning to let outside acts that weren't on Ireland come in and use the session at certain times.
Right, I was going to ask you about that. They were signed to Rough Trade, weren't they?
That was it. So Rough Trade booked the studio for a weekend, and my studio boss, Trevor Wyatt, he said to me, we've got a band coming at the weekend. Do you think you can do the session? And I said, yeah, who is it? He said, Rough Trade had booked a band called the Smiths in. And I was like, yeah, definitely, because I'd already
heard of them.
I'd heard about them. I'd heard This Charming Man on the radio and stuff, and I was really impressed. And I seen them on Top of the Pops. I was quite impressed, very impressed. And I was like, yeah, definitely, I'll definitely do the session. So Saturday morning, I'm setting up everything, and John Porter was still producing.
Right, he did the first album.
He did on and off.
He did the Smiths, the eponymous first one.
The first album, and then that Hatful of Hollow, which was some radio sessions. That's how John met them in the first place.
He was a radio guy.
He was one of the John Peel and Cliff Jensen radio kind of session producers. So they came in, the Smiths, with John Porter, and I was the engineer on that session, and that session was Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. So that was recording a single, so straight in at the deep end, kind of recording a track, and I tried to work as efficiently and as well as I could, and obviously it kind of impressed Johnny and Morrissey, because they took my name and number, as it were, and they said we'll be in touch. And then the next single they did, which was William Was Really Nothing, they did in another studio with another engineer. So I thought, oh God, they've forgotten about me. That chance has gone. That ship has kind of. But I hadn't, because I remember I got a phone call from Jeff Travis saying, like, the band want to do the next record, Meter's Murder, the second album, and they want to produce it themselves, but work with someone they like and trust. Would you be up for engineering it? So I was like, absolutely.
Brilliant.
So that was the start of my kind of,
They were so young, though, weren't they?
Well, we all were. I think Morrissey's only a couple of 2 or 3 months older than me.
How old were you when you did Meter's Murder then?
I reckon I must have been about 24. It was 84, I think it was. 84, 85. I mean, I'd have to double check, on the discography of the Smiths when it was, but I think it's 84, I think. Yeah. Johnny was 21, Morrissey was 24. We were very young. It was like kids in a toy shop together, when we were going off to make that next record. So.
Right.
I remember buying that album, I have to say, because I was at Utopia at that time, and I was still sort of assisting there. I remember buying it, and the Headmaster Ritual was the first track on it, and being blown away, man. It was a real moment for me. I was like, oh, bollocks, this sounds really good.
Yeah.
And that's when I first heard about
Well,
it.
you know, I mean, I look back on it, and to me, it's flawed. I mean, I'm still learning my way. You know, there was a tendency back in those days, I think, definitely to dig into the EQ a bit too much and over EQ things and stuff. But it was kind of very much an 80s
It was the time
thing, wasn't it? Yeah, you know,
it was the time.
But you know, it's by no means perfect. But then you never do stop learning, really, do you? In this game.
Did you do How Soon Is Now as well?
No, see, that was another thing. So they'd done that, and that was a blinding track, and that sounded great. So again, that was with John Porter,
right?
And I can't remember who they did.
I think was it Mark Wallace who did that?
It could have been, yeah.
I think it might have been.
And he did a great job on that. So you know, it was you know, I was always kind of aware of being on, kind of keeping on my toes to make sure that I didn't lose the gig, you know. But again, you know, it's not purely down to technical ability as well. It's how you get on with people and so on. And I always say that about production in general. You know, it's not about how you twiddle the knobs and how you plug in things. It's about how you relate to people.
I've also, when bands have ever asked me, I will say that for me, production is 75% psychology, 25% ability.
Man management.
It is, isn't it?
Getting
It
the best
really
out
is.
of people and so on.
I mean,
So-
you must have. I mean, we'll come to this later, I guess. But you must have had to do a lot of that over the years because you've worked with some sort of spiky characters. I would say.
Yeah.
Over the years, and got something, you know, sellable out of them.
Yeah.
From Pete Doherty to Graham.
Well, they do
Coxon,
say there's a
you know.
thin line between genius and madness, don't they? And certainly, I mean, I've been very lucky. I've worked with some wonderful artists, both guitar players, lyricists, singers. You know, I've been very blessed in that respect.
Right.
But there are certain challenges that certain people throw up that you've got to learn to deal with. I mean, I think if I had tried to, I mean, as you know, so you've mentioned Peter. I mean, I've done 2 Baby Shambles records and a solo record with them. All have had their kind of testing moments, and I don't think I could have done that if I'd been, you know, like I did when I did Meet As Murder. If someone as difficult as that had been given to me at that age, I think I would have most probably collapsed and, you know, and given up. But you know, I brought all the kind of knowledge to bear when I worked on those records, and drew on that knowledge to really, you know, make sure that the work was done and we got something out of it at the end.
I've got a stack of old smash hits clippings, and I happened to be looking through them a couple of months ago, and there's a day in the life of Stephen Duffy with lots of pictures.
Oh,
and so
okay,
forth.
yeah.
And there's a picture of you.
Yeah.
Because there's a moment where he's been sodding about in Soho all day doing photo shoots, and then halfway through the day, he says, "Oh yeah, well I'm going to go to the studio now to lay down some tracks." And then there's a picture of him at the desk with yourself.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I know, it's quite funny. So that must have been, what, 85, 86?
Yeah, well, Stephen actually was one of the first records, or artists rather, I kind of produced or co-produced, post the Smiths, really.
Right.
You know, he was one of the first artists to kind of tap into working with myself, and again, what a great writer. I mean, you know, obviously at the time it was Stephen Tintin Duffy, so it was much more pop-based. But I always knew there was something deep within Stephen that was, you know, that was a really true, fine songwriter.
I did a very brief session with him when it was Dr. Calculus.
Oh, right, okay.
Thing, and it was just a B-side. It was one of my, must have been around 84, 85. I was just about to leave Utopia.
Right.
And he came in, and it was in our little 16-track studio where everyone came in to do demos and what have you.
Yeah.
And he rocked up, and I'd met him because they'd mixed one of the earlier dance versions of Kiss Me.
Yeah.
With Francois K.
Yeah.
Doing it in the Utopia mix room.
Yeah.
Before the Trevor Horn production one of it.
Yeah.
And it was one of the most fun sessions I did with him because he was a lovely guy.
Yeah.
I really liked him, and it was just utterly random. I mean, it was he would come in with a DMX drum machine, and he just set something up and a loop, played a bit of guitar on it, a bit of bass, and then there was just rambling in French and stuff all over it. And that was it. It was done. It was just so much fun to work with him.
I liked Utopia. I thought, I mean, the location was not lovely, wasn't it? Up in the Primrose Hill, and the Smiths did a session there. We did Half a Person, which is a lovely track. I think we did.
Oh, that must have been after I gone.
Hold on. No, Half a Person. No, that was done at Mayfair Studios. I'm getting confused.
Oh, that was just up the road.
Yeah. Stretch Out and Wait, though, which was a B-side. We did that at Utopia.
Did you?
Yeah.
So, what do you think was the first record that you'd done? And I'm assuming this would have been back in the Fallout Shelter. What was the first thing you did there? Do you think that was for you? You got it now. You can handle a session. Was it one of the reggae bands you worked with, or was it?
Well, no. I mean, most of the time I was working at Ireland. I was kind of assisting Grouch or Godwin most of the time, and there was a couple of other engineers as well. But I was lucky. I mean, the session I mentioned about the Smiths doing Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now was kind of within the first 2 or 3 sessions I did when I was fully on my own.
Wow.
Believe it or not.
Yeah.
So that session was, I think I'm handling this okay. I think I'm doing a good job. I hope so.
No
anyway.
one's thrown me out yet.
No one's thrown me out or told me, like put your finger out. So I was very lucky in that respect, that it kind of clicked pretty quickly, and then.
Do you think your background as a musician had helped you in bonding with the group, or do you think it was purely on an engineering?
I don't know. I mean, at that point, I was really focusing on the engineering side of things to make sure I did a good job. They didn't need me to show them how to play anything. You know what I mean?
Course,
I wasn't so I just thought, I've just got to be on the case. I've got to make sure that John, the producer's happy, the band are happy. I try and get a sound together as quickly as possible and as efficiently and as tasteful as possible. Quickly, and that's one thing. I think one of the things that I've always conducted this kind of way of thinking. I had done many sessions, sometimes with kind of artists when I was assisting Groucho and Godwin, where things would go on through the night, and I used to say, because I was the only assistant engineer, I would get to about 2 or 3 in the morning and I'd go, listen, I've got to go because I've got to be in here tomorrow morning at 9:30, 10 o'clock to do editing and stuff, and stuff that on the record label might need me to do, so. And they were very sweet about it. They understood that I was working long hours, so they let me go. But one thing I learned was that by doing all-night sessions, you don't necessarily do any more work than you would do if you started early and go to bed. You know what I mean? So one thing I did, consciously, I made the decision that to use time efficiently and try and be, I've always conducted it this way, and this is what happened when I worked with Blur later on. I said, no, we want to be in the studio at 10, and we're going to finish at about 9:30, 10 o'clock, and you're going to go home to your girlfriends and unwind and watch TV, have a beer on the way home, whatever, and then be in the studio again tomorrow morning, rather than this work till 3 and 4 in the evening. Isn't it exciting, man? Being in the studio. It's like you get burnt out after a while.
Sure. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
And so, I know that's different, and some people think it's a bit boring, but I do treat it as like it's a job, and I'm going to do the best job I possibly can for people. And for that to happen, I've got to be alert and on the case. I don't want to be, phased out and wishing I was somewhere else.
That's something that I've heard Damon mention. That
I taught that to him, and that's an approach that he's now carried on.
Definitely, and he credits you with that, which is cool.
Yeah, if you're in a residential studio and you're trying to make the most of what you've got, I did that with the Smiths. Obviously sometimes we were staying in residential studios, and you got to work till.
Whenever.
But still, even then with Johnny, Johnny was he was a real night owl. If he could be up all night, he would be, especially back then, I think he's different now, Johnny, with his approach to it. But I would say that I've got to be up in the morning because I've got to work with Morrissey, because Morrissey, would always want to do his thing, normally quite early in the day. So I'd get to about, like half midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, guys, I'd like to kind of call it a day now, because I've been listening to stuff now since 10 this morning.
Well, it's tiring. It's so tiring.
Yeah, and we've got the work done. Never went up. One thing I can honestly say, and I'm kind of very proud of, I've never gone over budget. I've never gone over time on any record that I've worked on, because I think of that approach that I'd kind of take to it, really.
Yeah. Well, I agree and concur and do the same thing myself, to be honest with you. You're right, it is a job, and also you have people relying on you to get this done, and you say on budget and on time. Yeah. And fanning around for 3 days on a snare drum set. I'm not interested.
Do you remember back in the 80s, like hiring stuff in was always a big thing, wasn't it? And I used to, there were certain engineers that I won't mention any names, but they had racks of this stuff hired in and they weren't using it.
The rent bill's incredible.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, well, actually the artist is paying for this. It's not the record label, it's the artist that's paying for it, and you're working for them, and you're making a really deep pit in their finances by having all this gear, and you don't really need it, and so again, I would always be efficient. If I was recording stuff, I'd get the gear in for when I need it and let it go again. If I need it back again on the mix, it'll come back. But that thing of just block booking it for week upon week upon week, I just thought, it's not fair. If you look at the kind of records, I love, like the Ken Scott productions of Bowie tracks and so on, I think they just had an EMT plate and a tape delay and stuff, I think it's better to have a few bits of kit and know how to use it well than having tons and tons and tons of just not really knowing how to deal with it, and so that's always been my policy as well, really.
Well, I think that's a sensible way of doing it, really. And as you say, particularly the sort of bands you work with, similar to the sort of bands I work with, there's not a massive amount of money to make these records,
especially nowadays.
No, and you've got to make them efficiently and quickly, and you can.
Yeah. So that's kind of always been an approach, I think. I don't want to be too kind of straight-laced and boring about it, but that was, as I say, it is a job, and you're doing a job for someone. You're doing a job for the artist. I always think of that. I'm not doing it for the label. I mean, I know the label are involved, but primarily I'm being employed by the artist to help them make their record. So I'm accountable to them, and I always have that in my mind when I'm working on a project.
Do you think that because obviously from my perspective, you've done a lot of indie.
Yeah.
Were the budgets smaller in the indie scene anyway, so you had to kind of approach,
I guess so, perhaps. I guess that might be relatively true, but then again, having said that, I mean, the indie scene, the alternative scene, whatever you want to call it, was relatively healthy back especially in the 90s, obviously when Blur took off. You know what I mean? I mean, I could, if I wanted to, I had everything I could possibly possibly needed, but I just don't like the idea of spending a huge fortune with bands' money unnecessarily, because I always think also if you make a record and it is really expensive and it's a failure, then it's even more a reason for either the record label or the artist never to work with you again.
I think there's also something to be said for having only a limited amount of equipment
and know how to use it
to work with as well, and I think it makes you more creative. I mean, I think when we both started, which was sort of the early 80s, and there was no MIDI, there was no anything of this stuff, and so you had to think of ways. It's like the artist will go, I see this, and you're thinking, okay, how the fuck am I going to make this happen?
Yeah.
But you can.
Yeah.
So obviously the Smiths was kind of the record where you were getting your stuff together. Do you think that was the record that changed things for you? Do you think working after that?
Well, I think what
did you do
there,
anything between working with the Smiths and doing Meet Is Murder? Or were they...
I think I was just doing lots of little in-house things, nothing that majorly kind of like changed anything for me. So, I mean, as I said, the first thing where I felt like I was beginning to get onto the steps of production was making Meet Is Murder with the Smiths, because when it's just the band, the artist, and just the engineer, then obviously there are certain duties and certain values you're bringing to it which are kind of dipping into the realms of production. I mean, I would be trying to make sure that in the studio I was getting a sound, like I'll choose a reverb for the snare or for Johnny's guitars, so that when the band were playing, it sounded like we're getting towards the sound we're going to go for this particular track. And sometimes I'd print that reverb or whatever. I mean, it'd normally be a Lexicon or an AMS RMX, And once I got the vibe for the snare, because obviously back in the 80s, the snare thing, the reverbs was it was never as pronounced with the Smith stuff as it was with other acts at the time, but that influence was there. So, you'd kind of like go, well, this is great, and then print that. And then sometimes you might not use it on the final mix, you might get a better one, but that would definitely be there as a reference, because that was the sound we were using while we were tracking.
Right, that's interesting. You printed the reverb.
If we ran out of tracks, I mean, because again, this is the other discipline, the discipline of working on 24 track, it makes you focus, whereas now, infinite tracks. I still don't like infinite tracks and Pro Tools. I still try and imagine that discipline of, there's my drum tracks, there's my bass, there's my guitars, and so basically what would happen would be, if I ran out of space, and obviously I'd go get rid of that, but I'd have notes on, the good old track sheets that we used to have, and with recall notes of what things were.
Endless rubbing out, an extra tambourine added to vocal tracks.
Yeah, exactly.
And are they going down live mainly as a band?
They were then, I mean, you kind of, sometimes we'd have a click track just to count us in. I mean, Mike had played to clicks all the way through. I think How Soon Is Now's done to a click all the way through. Although I didn't do that session, but I think there was that discipline on that one to do that. Some songs were clicked all the way through, some weren't. They were just clicked to count us in, and then it would come out after a while. But they were in good shape then. I mean, the band were either touring or in the studio, so they were on
their game, weren't they?
Yeah.
And it was such a short period of time as well, wasn't it?
You think about it. I mean,
doing all their albums in.
How quickly would you have made that up, for instance?
That was weird on
That was a long time ago.
because it was spread out over 2 distinct sessions because they were so busy. So we started up actually at Amazon Studios, which is out in Kirby outside Liverpool. Godforsaken place. I mean, forgive me for saying it, but it was.
We talked to Gil about that. That's where he started.
God, it was awful. So yeah, endless. I think our diet was crisps and chocolate because Morrissey. The whole band was not eating meat then, and so it was a distinctly unhealthy diet. I remember that. And we literally were getting picked up in this white Mercedes and driven from Manchester to Liverpool every day to this, to Amazon Studios. Yeah. So we did that. And then we did a session at the Ridge Farm, which was a residential done in Surrey, going towards Gatwick or Sussex, whatever it is. And then I finished it off at Fallout Shelter. There's actually footage of me with the band in the Fallout Shelter that was featured on an Old Grey Whistle Test programme that came out around about that time. And so yeah, basically I mixed it all on the. I think it would have been. It definitely was at Fallout Shelter at Ireland. So that was the first Smiths album that I worked on in the can, and although I didn't get a production credit on there, I knew that I had put a certain amount of production values and decisions into it. So it was a good stepping stone for me to kind of to continue from.
What did you do after? What was your sort of?
Well, I think Stephen Tintin Duffy was fairly soon after that, if I remember rightly.
I'm always interested in how producers go from one project, because I certainly looked to do things that were slightly different each time, and it seems like you were doing something similar, working, because Stephen at that time was fairly eclectic.
Yeah. But see, I was working on quite a lot of kind of good. Again, I can't remember all the acts now because it's such a long time ago. But most of the Island record stuff was a bit more kind of R&B, perhaps reggae based, a bit more groovy, dance based. So there was a little bit of that, and also at the time, never getting the 12-inch mix. All us engineers were given a chance to show off our, reverbs and delays and God knows what, and bore people to tears for the next 6 minutes of a track that should have finished 6 minutes ago. But never mind. Yeah, but so you did learn certain production tricks and things, and there was a kind of an alternative dance scene as well. There was.
You must have picked up stuff though from working with the reggae bands and
the use of delays and so on and so forth. So I think I was able to apply that a little bit to working with Stephen, less so with the Smiths. Having said that, Barbarism Begins at Home, which is on Meet Is Murder. There was a little bit. That's quite a danceable track, and I remember
funky, isn't
it's quite. I did some dropouts and things on that. Things suddenly cut out and then come back in again and so on. So there was a little bit of that kind of theory applied to the production and mix of that.
Things you picked up along the way.
Yeah. But as you mentioned, the Smiths were very productive at this point. So within months of finishing Meet Is Murder, we'd started working on sessions that became The Queen Is Dead.
Yeah. And they were doing singles separately at this whole time as well.
In between as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Because they're very. I like that about them in a way. I think they decided to be kind of Beatlesy with the singles, not necessarily on the album.
Exactly.
So John Porter was still doing singles, I think, wasn't he? He was doing Panic and.
Yeah, well, that Panic was after The Queen Is Dead, but you're quite correct. Well, what happened was, I think after Meet Is Murder, they went off and they actually did a little session themselves up in Manchester on a little 8-track, and that was The Boy with a Thorn in His Side. And then they brought it down to London, and I transferred it to 24-track, and we did some extra kind of string, emulated string overdubs to it and stuff. And we also recorded Rubber Ring at that time, which was a really good B-side. That was so that was the initial session that was kind of adding towards The Queen Is Dead. Then we did another session at Rack where we did Big Mouth Strikes again.
Okay,
but these songs were all being kept for the album. But we were doing them a little bit piecemeal, and then we did the major session, which was down at Jacobs in Farnham, and that was a residential, and that's when we actually did move Lock, Stock and Barrel into the studio, the band, and we really focused on making the majority of the album.
Wow, okay.
I used to do a lot of records down there. I loved that studio, Jacobs. I thought it was great. The Neve room with the half barn, half exactly. I thought it was a great
so that was a good place to be, and we made that record, and at that time, the Smiths, Johnny and Morrissey had agreed to give me a co-production credit on that because they realised how much kind of input I was putting into it.
That's quite a rare thing for Morrissey by all accounts, to agree to do.
Yeah, well, I
think
I only got 1 point, but it was enough. You know what I mean? The thing
the actual
was the credit is worth something. You know what I mean? And I basically brought it up. I just said to Johnny and Morrissey, do you think it would be possible for me to get a co-production credit? And they kind of went, I think they thought about it and said, fine. So
nice. And were you conscious that you were doing the hot band at the time?
I was very aware that there was a certain pressure over your head that you don't want to mess this up because this band is so kind of revered at the moment, and things are going great. So you don't, if you can ride this wave, it's a good wave to get on. Because
I mean, I mean, it's sort of skipping a lot forward, but I always think about the Great Escape, which you're coming off this enormous album, and things are going absolutely nuts for them around. But did you also then, was this sort of feeling of like, bloody hell, this is the hottest band in the country, and or did you try and put that out of your head, like, I'm just going to concentrate on
try to put it out of my head? But it was obviously at that time post Parklife, I mean, it was kind of Blur, Oasis Wars and everything. It was kind of, it was mania, wasn't it? Again, I just really tried to focus on the job in hand and get that done. I mean, you don't want to mess up, obviously, and you want to make sure that you do a good job. And because it was, I nearly didn't get I did some work with Blur in the first album. I did There's No Other Way, which was their kind of second single, and the one that went, did very well for them. But despite that, I only did about a third of that first album because they'd been working with other producers, and so my tracks were added towards the end, as it were. But Balfe at Food, he didn't want me to do the next record, and I think they had the intention of recording the second album with Andy Partridge.
Now that's interesting, because I was at Rack Studios when they were doing some stuff with him, and I was in doing Ep.7, who you worked with later on. And I was in Studio 1 working with them. I think that's who I was working with, and Andy Partridge was in with Blur in Studio 3, which is the one down the corridor going to go before you went upstairs. And so I was trying to remember when that was time, because I only thought about that the other day, and it wasn't going well, to be honest with you. That session, I remember there was a lot of shouting going on. We were all in Studio 1.
Really shouting?
Oh
everything.
Damon was. I think Damon was clearly not happy with what was going on, and there was a bit like,
I've read all sorts of things about this stuff,
and it wasn't going to. I think he wanted to basically. Andy was like, I'm done, and they were like, no, you're not. This is not done.
Well, it was funny because I mean, what happened was. I'd gone to the Marquee to check out a band called the Cranberries, who I was about to work with, and I just wanted to see what they were like, live. And so I went along to see the Cranberries, and that night Graham Coxon's in the audience, and I saw Graham, and he looked a bit down, and I said to him, "How's it going?" And he kind of reported, "Oh, it's not going that great. It's all been a bit of a struggle, blah blah blah." And I said to him, "Well, you guys are great. You're a great guitar player. You're a fantastic band. It's going to happen for you. Don't worry." And I think he must have gone back and told Damon that he'd seen me, because within a day or two, I got this phone call from Damon saying, "Hey, Streety, do you want to come and have a meeting? We'll talk about, So I think they'd kind of basically circumnavigated Food Records and kind of came to me directly and said, "We'd like you to work with you again." So that was it. So that was me back on board for the majority of Modern Life is Rubbish.
They seem to do a lot of circumnavigating Food, though. Blur.
Well, I think as time went on, they kind of because it was a funny deal, because they were on Food, but they also were signed to EMI, and then sometimes. But it's funny because after we finished Modern Life is Rubbish, I knew it was a good piece of work, but it didn't really. I mean, it went down relatively well with the press but there was a reaction to it. Although not many people bought it, the people that did buy it really loved it, and I knew then that there was something happening. Really, I remember seeing them in the tent at Reading, and it was like there was a real reaction to the songs that come from. It was just incredible. But I always remember when I started on the sessions that became Parklife, being called to a lunch by the management and one of EMI's A&R people, and I was kind of told this record's got to be. This has got to be the one. It's got. Don't. You've got to deliver an album that's even better than. It was the first time ever I've been kind of given a kind of a pep talk, as it were, before I'd even started on something. I found
Had they even heard the songs by that point?
I think they had some demos. I mean, because that's the way Blur recorded them. They would then go in the studio demo songs and then be given clearance from the Food Records, or it would be Food. So you're right, you can record that one, and that one. You know?
Right. Out of the 20, these are the 12.
Yeah, these are the ones to do, and it's funny because I've told this story many times, but the girls and boys thing is quite an interesting one because I wasn't authorised to record that song, but I didn't know that.
Authorised?
So I was already kind of doing other songs, and then they paid me a very, but I think Damon paid me a very basic home demo of it, but just had a little drum machine, and and the girls were like, boys are like, this is actually a lot of fun, and because it was so different to everything else we were doing in this initial session that we were recording, I thought let's do this, 120 BPM disco track, and let's have some fun with
great
it.
bass line on that.
So we did that in an afternoon, pretty much. Because back then I had the old Atari 1040 computer, with the Akai sampler, and we put down the bass. We put down the basic drums and bass synth, and then Alex played his bass on top, and Graham did his thing. And by the time we got that, it was big. It's like, this is going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be really good. And the next day, I always remember Andy Ross phoning me from Food and kind of asking how it's going. And I said, "Oh, Andy, it's going great. Oh, yesterday we did this really great track. It's called Girls and Boys." And there was this kind of slight, "We're not authorised you to do that one." And I was like, "Well, sorry, but I think you'll like it when you hear it, So thank God it came in and they liked it.
Brilliant.
But
God, it's weird how that happens, isn't it? And it wasn't song 2 recorded while you were waiting for a piece of equipment to turn up?
No, but that again came out of the ether, as it were.
Right.
Basically, what happened was, by this point, when we'd gone to the Blur album, I was very conscious that I wanted to bring something new to the creation of the record. Mm-hmm. And I'd been reluctant to use Pro Tools at that point. I hated it. I was very much used. I was so used to working on a normal desk and working with tape that the thing I decided I really wanted to kind of go for, because it really sounded good, but also it felt familiar to use, was the Atari Radar. So I bought 16 tracks of Radar back then, which was quite expensive. I think it was about 25 grand or something.
I remember the Radar system.
It was but it sounded great. So that happened. What happened there was, every Blur album, there's always a very quick, punky little number, Bank Holiday or Globe Alone or something like that. And this was the little punky one to go on the album. Yeah. And I had 2 drum kits in the room at the time, just mic'd up slightly differently. Yeah. And we decided we wanted like a lo-fi kind of rhythm. And so I think it was Graham and Dave were hitting this rhythm, and we just used the mics in the room. We didn't actually do any close miking on that. And I just found a little bit of the rhythm they were playing, and I just went marked it in, marked it out, looped that, and that was our, and that was the backbeat. And then I just played that down, and the band just played it, and they just lashed onto it and played, and it came together so quickly. It really did. And at the time, Damon had it was like a little loop, like a little hook, and I think and then he started going woohoo rather than whistling. Okay. And it was like, that's actually quite universal, the woohoo thing, because it was like a guide vocal. It was really raw, handheld.
International as well.
International. Everyone knows, and it was kind of, well, we got to keep that, because that's this. And Damon tried to write more interesting or more kind of lyrics that made more sense. But we came back to it. About 80% of that vocal on the final track is the guide that was done on the. Because it had such an attitude to it.
Well, it's so weird how that happened.
We were just experimenting with the Radar, and having fun and just lashing into it.
And the most colossal bass sound as well.
Classic.
It's fantastic.
It was a lot of fun.
We're skipping wildly all over the place, aren't we?
Well, that's all right.
It's great. No, it's great.
It's great. So, kind of in timeline, it went Smiths, Blur, Cranberries, is that?
Yeah, but Blur and the Cranberries were very close, because literally what had happened was I'd done the first Blur record, and I think I did the first Cranberries record simultaneously as I was working on the Modern Life is Rubbish, because I told you I had that meeting. I saw Graham. And you were going to see the Cranberries that night. So I think I had to fit the Cranberries and Blur around each other. So I think I was working on kind of both albums within that 6-month period.
And did you do Linger?
Yeah. So basically, what happened with the Cranberries, I Island Records called me in and they played me some tracks, and I really liked it. I thought it was great, and I picked out the songs I wanted to do from the initial demos that Island played me. I actually heard them, in the record company, as it were. And I said, I'd like to do Linger. And they said, oh, no, we want to hold that one back, but can you do some of the others first, So we did Dreams, and I did a couple of other tracks as well. So I did a test session with them, 2 weeks in Dublin, came back with 2 or 3 songs completed, and that they liked it. Denny Cordell was the A&R person for that particular project.
Yeah.
So he's an English guy who went to America, because they were signed to Island America rather than Island UK, which was quite important in a way, because what happened next was Danny liked it, so then I was called back in to finish off that first album, and we finished that album, and they put Dreams out, and it completely flopped. Right. Nothing happened, and they went, what do we do now? And basically what happened was, this was around about kind of September, October of that year, and they put the album out to be reviewed in all the magazines, Select Magazine, Vox, all those magazines and things and so on. And because the album reviews were okay but not great, but the album didn't come out because they decided after Dreams wasn't a hit that they didn't want to risk putting the record out before Christmas and it disappearing.
Okay.
So they waited, and they put the record out the following February with Linger just before it, and the album proper, the first album.
Yeah.
And it completely disappeared without trace.
Okay.
No one wanted to review it again because they reviewed it 3 months previously,
sure,
when the record didn't come out. And basically, they were like, the record company in the UK were kind of not that interested because it wasn't their act. It wasn't they weren't a priority for them.
They were just licensed.
So they were like, well, what do we do now? And they just kind of ended up doing a little bit of touring with Hothouse Flowers. They were basically waiting for the phone call to say you're dropped. But what happened instead is that Denny Cordell managed to get the video for Linger on, there was that Alternative Nation, which was quite a big thing on MTV back in the day.
Yeah.
And it began to start taking off in America. So he gave him a call and said, you guys got to come over here, we're going to try and get you some dates and see if we can take off. So they did. They went to America, they toured with Suede, and by the end of that tour with Suede, I think the Cranberries were drawing in more people than Suede would do, which was really weird because Suede were an incredible live band at that point. But for whatever happened in America, it just it went the other way, and something that we were kind of. I always remember people saying, "Oh, I'm not sure about that album. It's not, the mix wasn't right, perhaps, whatever," and so on. It was like, well, bollocks, it's fine. I think Dave Bascom was called in to do a remix of one of the tracks or something. I was thinking, there's nothing wrong with the record. It's just you just didn't get it right.
Yeah, totally.
And sure enough, record came back a year later. They put it out again, and huge hit.
Yeah. I remember that. I remember Linger suddenly taking off, because before then I thought the Cranberries, they sounded like not in terms of what they sounded like, but just seeing their name in the press. It's like a sort of
But Dreams is a universal song now. You hear it on the radio all the time, and at the time when it first came out, no one wanted to know. There's nothing wrong with it at all. But I was told, I'm not sure about the mix, not a bit. I was like,
but it has that sort of Linger has that kind of thing that the Americans love, which is the sort of Irish reference points, and and you can see it throughout history. Obviously with U2, But and then they did a Radiohead, really sort of having like a big hit in America, and then suddenly the British catch up. And then the next album, did you do the next album as well? Right. That's quite rocky. Zombie is a
Zombie. Because basically what happened was, I think that when they first started, they were quite a mellow band. There was quite a lot of slowish mid-tempo songs, and because they were on the road and touring, they realised that in their live set they needed some more rocky tracks, some more songs when they were going for it. So basically it was kind of, it needed to happen. They needed to write a couple more up-tempo songs, and it happened that Zombie was one of them. I think by that time the band had been on the road quite a lot. They worked really hard. They worked incredibly hard.
Right.
They toured every single little place they could. Between recording, they were constantly on the road. And God bless them, they got better. They did. Right. They became a better band. But they were kind of, at the time, I think there was there was still that slight, especially in America, there's still that kind of after hang of grunge. You know, you had all the kind of the bands that came out in the wake of Nirvana. And so they were inspired by that.
Sure.
I mean, Smashing Pumpkins was huge.
Zombie is very Smashing Pumpkins.
That was definitely my reference point when we were kind of going for the sounds on that. There's that first Smashing Pumpkins album. You know, that kind of wall of Marshall kind of really kind of rap pedal kind of driven stuff.
Right. When you do a number of albums with bands like them and Blur, do you notice the difference in the members and the personalities when they come back in the studio for the next record? Like if a big success has happened, do you ever sort of think, no, they're a bit too, they come in the studio a bit bigger for their boots and they need a sort of
I mean it happened to a slight degree with Dolores, God bless her soul. She kind of I think with Damon I've got a really good natural relationship with him, so although he might come over as being quite bullish and quite cold with people, and I have seen him cut people to the quick, you know. I mean, but I get on fine with him because I think there's a nice natural understanding. We go back a long way and so on, and I like a certain amount of arrogance from front people anyway. I think you've got to be.
They have to have.
They've got to have that. That's why you're a front person, because I'm putting myself out in front of the band, you know. And I think there is that arrogance that you just got to accept it. It's there, and that's their strength. But what happened was, unfortunately, with the Cranberries, is that I think Dolores just got. When we got to the end of doing the second album, I always remember I'm literally finishing off the last mix, and we went for a drink in a pub at the end of the afternoon session, basically to celebrate the fact we nearly finished the record. And she kind of came in with this comment, I'd like to have a co-production credit on the record. This is Dolores. And I said, well, no. I said, I've produced this record. I said, you know, and it's like, no one, this is the first thing I've heard about, you know, you wanting this. Well, I wrote the string parts. I said, well, it doesn't matter if you wrote the string parts. It doesn't mean that you get a co-production credit. I said, producing, it's been there for every single minute of every single thing going down on this record. And you weren't, you know. And also, it's just not fair. And I just thought, this is, you know, a little bit kind of weird, kind of coming out at the very end like this. And then basically I was threatened, well, if you don't, not at that particular time, but very shortly afterwards, the management from the Cranberries kind of let my management know that if I didn't agree to it, they wouldn't work with me again. So I went, fine. So I just said, no, I'm not having it, you know. I said, Damon's never asked me for co-production credit, and, you know, and he was certainly putting in more input than Dolores was putting in on the sound of how the records were sounding. And I mean, all artists co-produce their records to a certain degree, because all artists say, I want it to sound like this, and I've got this idea, I want to do that. I mean, but, you know, if you've got one person that's coming in to oversee the whole thing and be the key filter, as it were, for everything, that's the job I think as a producer does. You can't come in at the end and say, well, actually, I think I want a co-production. So anyway, I said, fine. So that was the reason why I didn't work with the Cranberries for the next few albums.
But you know, artists are never very good at thinking. I've got to say this at the beginning because X, Y, and Z. I mean, you have this. Bands have this as well. You know.
But to be fair, she did apologise to me later on. I mean, they called me back, and she did admit that she should never have done that. And when I did work with them again, there was never any question about who was producing it. It was like,
well, that's fantastic.
That's a sort of answer to the negative question in a way, isn't it?
I think so.
We have a question. You know, this idea of things changing. How, you know, you can do something differently and everything changes because of success of a record, but then sometimes it can have a negative impact as well in some ways. I mean, as a producer, you was there a time in the 90s when you were sort of, did you feel like you were being offered too much of the same thing?
Not really. I think I've always managed to do things that I really truly want to do. I've never been someone that's keen to fill every single week of the year with work and just take work just to kind of fill the coffers, as it were. I think if you don't really feel that it's something that you're truly into, you won't do a good job on it as a producer.
You won't.
You've really got to be really within, when you're working with an act, I think, and obviously I'm known more for working with bands than I am with solo acts, but you've really got to become like an extra member of the band for that. You've really got to have all that vested interest. You've really got that kind of go through your veins. You know, you really got to feel like as if you're really working together as a team to get this done. And you know, and if you really truly are not into what they're doing, you're not going to do a good job because you won't make the right decisions. I think, you know.
Because I always think of the album, the Sleeper album, the It Girl, because that's like I mean, apart from the sort of the big guns, the Blurs and Oasis, that to me is like a classic Britpop album. and it's got tons of good songs on it, and it's a
I mean, a good songwriting team, especially. I mean, Lou obviously comes up with the lyrics and the top line and all that. And no, she's great. I mean, she's a great lyric. I knew she was a good lyricist. Again, given very unfair treatment, I think, by the music press at the time.
Sure, yeah.
But she's great. I mean, she's proven she's good with words, because she went on to become a good writer. And it was a pleasure to work with them again. Like I did last year.
Yeah. Did you?
Yeah, well, basically they reformed. I always remember going to see Lou and Andy, because they're married now.
That's right.
Andy, and because Andy works at BIM, down in Brighton, and I went down there for about 5-6 years ago to be a speaker at one of their events. And I remember seeing Andy and Lou together there, and I said, "You ever thought about reforming?" And she was like, "God forbid, no. I'm a writer now, and Andy's doing this thing," and she had no interest in it. But then I think what happened was that someone close to Lou had died, and she realised she only lived once. And then this offer came up, this Star-Shaped festival, which is a kind of 90s Britpop thing, to just kind of do a gig. And they thought, for a bit of fun, why don't we just reform and do that? And they did the shows, and they couldn't believe the reaction they got. The warmth and affection they got from the crowd was so positive. So they played these gigs. They were going down a storm. They couldn't believe the reaction they were getting. So they thought, well, that's the next thing really is to let's make an album, and because she was so inspired by the good vibes they were getting from people. But unfortunately got caught up in all this what's that funding company,
Pledge Music.
Yes. That's it. That's the one. They got caught up in that.
Massively wrong, hasn't it?
All the money they got all the money in from the fans, and they all kind of and then basically Pledge Music walked off with it. Absolutely despicable. They've basically
they were using bands' money to fund their offices.
Yeah,
it was so appalling.
Yeah, God, it's horror story, because they had such a good name for so many years as well.
I did a couple of records with Pledge, I think, in the early days.
Yeah. I remember hearing Chris.
Well, it kind of filled in the gap, didn't it? While the record labels were not signing kind of certain acts and things, and it kind of did help fill the gap in for a while. I
think all that stuff's perfectly reasonable. I think bands have got to find a way of funding records, and if record companies are not interested in that particular kind of music, nothing wrong with the music. You just need to find a way of making the record.
I think it works particularly well for bands, actually, where they have their own fan base anyway. Right. There's certain things crowdfunding really works for. Yeah, I think that's definitely one of them. But obviously, you've got to have the trust.
I mean, I don't know how it is for you these days, Chris, but I find that the budgets that I'm working on are so tight. You've got to be quick.
Budgets,
you have to be really, really quick.
You have to.
The days of spending 3 months in the studio on one album are well over.
I mean, to be honest with you, Steve, I spend probably 95% of my years mixing. And I do production stuff, but I did something with therapy just recently, like a 30-year anniversary thing. But most of the time I'm just mixing, because it's the budgets are so tight that it's almost like, well, I don't, I'm not sure how I can do this for you and actually come out with anything at the end of it.
So you're basically just kind of like coming at the end and just kind of trying to get like recordings that the bands have done on their own and just make it sound...
Well, sometimes bands have done their own or whatever, or they've done with other producers, or they've done whoever it might be.
Yeah.
But I would say most of the time now I just mix stuff. Which is great, because I enjoy doing it, and same as yourself, I'm known... it's not going to suddenly sound like the Prodigy if they give it to me. It's going to sound kind of what they are, but enhanced.
Yeah, exactly.
But you have to find different ways of making it work in this day and age. It's very difficult, and there's only a finite amount of stuff, and obviously there's younger producers and engineers coming up as well, and they're all perfectly capable. So it's tough. It's a tough time,
Well, I mean, at least now we are beginning to see some money come back in the game because of the official streaming sites. But I mean, about 10 years ago, the situation was shocking. There were bands that would be able to sell out Brixton Academy 2 or 3 nights in a row, but they put a record out and none of the people were buying it.
Well, also, unless with the age demographic as well, Radio 1 would have a cut-off, so they wouldn't play it. So it's just like, well,
the last
that's gone.
Was 2006 thereabouts, when Kaiser Chiefs, which I did, Kasabian and the Killers. They were the last, all became okay. But 3 bands that came out in the alternative scene that actually made and also the Arctic Monkeys. And actually, the Arctic Monkeys are the only one that have managed to kind of maintain radio play since then.
Yeah.
But everything else is, as you quite rightly said, Chris, just cut off. They're not interested anymore. The Radio 1 don't want to know, you know. But then you're a bit too spiky for Radio 2, BBC 2, so where do you fit in?
I know, it's really...
Okay, you might get something on Absolute, but Absolute Radio just plays generally a lot of older hits, you know. So there's really hard for
Radio
anything.
6 is more esoteric, so they're not going to...
Well, that's... Since 2010, I suppose, they've had their resurgence on Six Music. So that's now a kind of viable place.
I love that station, it's great. But you're right, it isn't... They try to be very kind of arty and esoteric sometimes, and I do think sometimes if something is a little bit more primal and kind of alternative, you know, I don't think they would play it.
That's true, that's true. There's a bunch of stuff that I don't ever hear on Six Music, because I'm a bit lazy. I get generally all my music from there. You know, and then someone will play something, and I'll be thinking, "Goodness, how have I missed this band?"
I mean, like you mentioned, Therapy. I mean, like they benefited from that time when a lot of alternative indie stuff was getting played on the radio.
Oh yeah,
it doesn't happen anymore.
No, well, they also benefited from Top of the Pops, which is gone. Yeah, where you know,
but you could get a record in the top 40 and actually get on TV and get it out there.
And it was spiky ass punk music, you know. Which
and nowadays, if you don't fit in, say, with Jules Holland's version of what he wants to have on later, you don't get any TV anywhere whatsoever.
Which is why I'm always amazed and glad and excited that bands like Royal Blood come along and get on the radio. You know, a two-piece making riff rock pop records, and they're great. And I think that they're done brilliantly. They get on Radio 1 and they're played, and I think that's fantastic, but it's so rare.
I mean, I do wonder, you know, like if the Smiths came out now, as they are, you know, like if they were doing exactly the same thing, what kind of radio station would play there? I mean, the other thing that's really changed is the press, the music press.
Sure.
I mean, back in the day, the quality of the writing in the NME and the sounds in Melody Maker was incredibly high.
It was so powerful.
But I mean, it just turned it into a bunch of kids that are bloggers, you know, and that's why the press now is music press is completely
totally. Yeah, you have the quietus, and that's about it, really. But I mean, they're not powerful enough to change anyone's career, you know. Sure, I'm just looking at the time.
We've got to ask the level 42 question.
We've got to ask the level 42 question.
Yeah.
What's that then?
Shall I elaborate? Okay, so in 1984, thereabouts, level 42, they'd had a couple of albums, they were doing all right.
Yeah.
But they sat down with each other and they said, right, lads, we've really got to hit pay dirt now. We've got to deliberately write a few hit singles.
Right.
So they did, and they had Something About You and Lessons in Love and all of those. And it did very well. Ironically led to ultimately the demise of the original lineup, but nonetheless they had these big hits and so on. Yeah. So really, the level 42 question is: would you deliberately sort of go to do a hit single? So you sit down at the beginning of the session and say, right, this song we're going to go all guns blazing and make it a hit.
I think the song dictates the way you approach it. I mean, I worked recently with the Pretenders. Actually, I worked with Chrissy Hine, the Pretenders, and you know, there was, you know, in the rehearsals, there's one song they're doing, and I was thinking, this to me sounds like the early kind of Pretenders, you know, the Nick Lowe produced stuff. Yeah. And I was like, and so when I, you know, I deliberately in my mind had that blueprint, and I wanted to follow that blueprint. Whether it's going to be a hit or not, I don't know. But obviously, again, it's the song that dictates to me the way to go. I mean, I knew with Girls and Boys as soon as we started recording it, I thought this is going to be a hit. I remember saying to Damon, "This is going to be your first top 5, Damon," I just thought, let's just keep, you know, like, let's not question it. Let's not think about it too heavily. Let's just go with it and have fun with it. And it's a bit kind of kooky and it's a bit kind of stupid as a song, but it's a lot of fucking fun. You know what I mean? And just go. I don't even question it. Just go for it. But the thing of deliberately writing a hit or, you know, producing, I don't think actually. I think it's more the writing of the song that dictates whether it's going to be commercial. Yeah. And then as a producer, you just got to make sure you if it ain't broken, don't try and fix it. And if it does need tweaking, then make sure you make the right decision. You know what I mean? That's how I feel anyway. Sure. When a band play a song to me.
Have you had experiences of bands writing what you think is a hit single and then deliberately trying to scuff it up? And, you know, shun it. No, we can't do that. It's too commercial.
I don't know about deliberately messing it up. I might have done it. I don't know. I mean, you know, as I say, it's a funny old thing. I mean, I always remember when I did Predict a Riot with Kaiser Chiefs, there was no pressure because basically then, well, it was pressure in a way in the sense that all it was a test session.
Right.
Be Unique were like, thinking of signing this act. I'd already just done the Ordinary Boys for Be Unique, so I had a nice working relationship with Mark, and he said, we're thinking of signing them. Can you just do a little session and see how it works out? I mean, okay then, I'll do that. So we went in and we did I Predict a Riot. I said, there you go, that's how they sound in the studio, and we're working with me.
Yeah.
Great, we'll sign them.
Oh right.
Okay, put it out as a single, bang, it just went,
Yeah.
And it just, I don't know, I mean, I didn't think about it too much, but again, subconsciously, everything that I've learned over the years, how I'm going to approach it. One of the key things on that was that I always remember talking with, because Nick, the drummer, was the main writer, and on the demos they'd done of that record, he and Ricky sing every single line together.
Okay.
And it sounds to me like a weird kind of Beach Boys type thing, but so when I was working with them, I said, look, Nick, I just want Ricky to sing. I want it to be a lead singer. There isn't a lead singer in this band. I said, well, there is. Nick wanted to sing everything that Ricky sang. He wanted to sing, and God bless him. He did write the songs, but I knew that it was losing character. If you've got everything tracked all the time, you lose the real true character of what the singer, is singing.
Yeah.
So that was one of the key things I did in that session. I said, Ricky is the lead singer, and you can come in on the choruses, but you're not singing all the way through. Nice. And that gave them that. And that's it. And Ricky's delivery on the verses is great on that song. It really is. And that was the other question. You're talking about writing or giving us another single, because then the next thing, the band and the record label say, well, we'd like to do Oh My God now, because that was again a track they'd done as a demo, which they knew was a good demo. And I went, good. I said, there's another song in their set though that by this time I'd seen them play live, and I said, there's a song in their set called Every Day I Love You Less and Less, which I think is a great title, and I think that'd be a single. So they went, okay, we'll just do both of them, just make sure they're hits.
Right. Okay.
Okay, fine. Yeah. Again, but we just whatever we did in those early sessions worked, and I didn't question it too much. I just went with instinct.
How fully formed were they when you got them as demos? Did you?
They were pretty well. I mean, they were good. Yeah, I mean,
players, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, they had some good, the general vibe, especially Predict a Riot. That was pretty much there. I mean, we added a few new extra elements. So put the little choppy kind of. There was always for me a little bit of madness in the specials about the Kaisers. It kind of doesn't really get mentioned much, but there is definitely a little bit of the kind of Jerry Dammers kind of keyboard thing, which I really like on that track. And in Every Day's Less and Less, I think I just kind of suggested they do a little drop out in the second verse. It's one of the key things I do in a lot of songs, actually.
Okay.
Stop a song being like that all the way through. It's just drop the drums out for the first line and then back in again and things like that.
So you go back to your early reggae dub roots, man.
Yeah, just kind of dropping things out so when they come back in again, it has a bit more energy rather than being constant,
I hear them all the time still on the radio as well. And they still sound... they're timeless. That's what's great about them.
Yeah.
Because I think they're such a good, I mean, without blowing smoke up your ass, they're a great production, and the mix of them is very. You can't really. It could have been done yesterday,
right?
Or it could have been done 15 years ago, and that's, I think, is a great sign of a great production as well. I think they're really good.
It's great. I mean, it's a good time. I was working with Chainsaw a lot at that time as well, so it was all kind of well recorded as well and mixed. But see, when I was working with Chainsaw on that, it's funny because a lot of people go, I mean, Chainsaw, God bless me, he's turned into a really good mixer now, and he did try and go into production and he didn't like it at all. He knew what his strength was. He was like, being as a mixer. So, but I always used to work with Chains on the mix. I would never kind of go, that's it, finish it off. I very much like, right, you finished doing your bit right now, sit down and then I'll play around with it, because I still feel that for me it's very much part of the production. I find it weird when producers say, oh no, I don't like mixing my own productions. I'm like, well, for me it's a big part of the job. I like to finish off something, or at least give me the first chance to finish it off. Even if you don't like it, then get it remixed, but at least let me finish it, because there are some production values that you can only bring to the song at the end when you're mixing,
and they've always been in your head how it's going to be,
how you want it to be and so on. You can't, but so you need to have that final chance to kind of balance it and everything and get things coming in and out as you want, because sometimes you don't really know that, especially when a band are just plunging through it,
Absolutely.
I wanted to just ask you about Happiness in Magazines, because that was the first Graham Coxon album you did, right?
That was the first one. I mean, that again, it's funny, when I stopped working with Blur, well, they stopped working with me, they decided to make the 13 album with William Orbit. So I was a bit gutted, to be honest
Sure.
with you. But then again, I look back and I thought, I've had a good innings with them, and sooner or later the band's going to want to try someone new. And at that time, there were some interviews in the press, and Graham was going through he was drinking then. He was quite bitter sometimes in the press, and he kind of may come up with this comment about, this is the first record I've enjoyed making. And it really cut me to the quick, I was really kind of like, that's a bit hurtful.
Right.
So I didn't see Graham for many years, kind of around about that time. And then so he'd done 2 or 3 solo records.
Yeah.
And then I got a call from Blur's management that he wanted to work with me on Happiness in Magazines. So I said, well, is that you, the label, and then or is it, Graham? I want to hear it from Graham that he wants to work with, because I said, some of the things he said about our work together in the past was a little bit, below the belt.
Sure. Yeah.
So I went along to see him play a show and had a good little chat with him backstage, and he convinced me that he did want me to do it. And I've got a good working relationship with Graham. Actually, we get on fine.
Because I always thought at the time, this might be a bit of a controversial thing to say, but Think Tank and that one came out around about the same time.
Right.
And I always thought, it's much better than Think Tank. It's like, this is and so it was a bit of a triumph in a way that it was. Yeah,
well, for me, it was a triumph in the sense I really wanted to make sure that I did a good job, because I love him, and he's such a great guitar player. I get such a buzz out of being in the studio with him.
They're great songs though, as well on that album.
But that was just basically him and me. Sometimes Chenzo, sometimes another guy called Tom Stanley, engineering. Graham plays everything. So basically, he would bash out a rhythm with a very simple little drum machine.
Yeah.
Do an acoustic or a very simple electric, kind of just playing along with it.
Yeah.
And that would be his click track. So he's playing he's got the metronomic thing of the snare, but he's also got the accents and things on the guitar to play to. And he would play drums to that.
Okay.
And then we put the bass on.
Right.
And then we put the guitars on. I mean, literally layered it up, and then he puts his vocals on.
Yeah.
And that was the other thing I always worked on more with Graham, was making sure the vocals were as good as I could possibly get out of him. Because he's not the most natural singer in the world.
Okay.
I think he'd even admit that. But he's finding his voice, and he really found his voice on that record, I think.
Yes.
And
with lyrics to match it as well. Quite witty on that one, I think.
And it was great fun. And I was really chuffed that when Freaking Out came out, and it was a proper bona fide hit for
It's a great song. I love that song.
I just remember laughing out loud when it first came on.
Drums out again.
Good way. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So drums out here and just let the riff go on for a bit, and it was like, it works great. Back in again.
Brilliant. I remember someone playing that in an indie club, and then playing Into the Valley by the Skids straight after.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad they picked up on, because that was a little homage.
Yes.
Because it was funny. It was dropping the drums out. Kind of nailed that, because the Skids do exactly the same thing.
Exactly the same thing. Yeah, totally.
So
exactly.
Brilliant. Yeah.
I think we're done.
Yeah,
that's
great.
Absolutely
Thank you,
fantastic.
Steve.
That's our pleasure. I'm sorry if I gabbled a bit too much.
No,
I'm sure you
don't
can do
worry.
a bit of
I thought it was
editing.
brilliant.
Not at
Thank you
all.
so much.
Stephen Street there. Hope you enjoyed that. If you did, remember you can always leave a review for our podcast, which helps others find the show. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. We're going to leave you with a final outtake from our chat with Stephen, which we recorded just as we were packing up. And Stephen spoke a little bit about the recording of Blur's unexpected 2015 album, The Magic Whip. See you next time.
They literally just transferred the demos off of Damon's iPad, and then played on top of them. And then Damon went back and worked on them a bit and kind of lost interest. It's like, so these songs sat in the can, no one doing anything, and they were literally just jams done over these songs that that Damon had sketched out. And then nothing was happening to it, so they sat in the can for about a year or so, and then Graham went to Damon and said, I'm going to try and do something with these songs, because Damon had basically, I'm doing this now. I've tried it. It's nothing. It's not happening.
Right.
And Graham went to him and said, I want to take them and work with them, and I want to work with Stephen, because I know,
we'll get something going.
We'll get something going. So Graham,
I remember reading about that. There was hours and hours of this.
It was hours and hours of this stuff. So I said to Graham, look, I don't want to sit there with you over my shoulder while listening to it for the first time. I want you to trust me that give me everything you've got. I would take what I think are the best tracks, and I would do some editing, because they were rambling, they were going on. I said I will try and put some shape into it. And then you come in and we'll take it from there, and that's what happened. So basically, I mean, it's a record you couldn't have done before Pro Tools. I mean, it really needed kind of digging in there and copy that bit, put it in there.
And was he happy with the choices you made?
Yeah. So and then Graham came in. He did his thing on top, and at this point we still didn't know Damon.
Were they 2-track or were they kind of Pro Tool sessions?
Pro Tool sessions, but they were just very, very just sketch, just like song. It just ends. You know what I mean? Nothing. Nothing was really
got to make a song out of it.
And then basically what happened was that at this point we still didn't know that Damon would do it. So we had to, Graham and I had to really work on it as much as we could to give it some kind of shape. And then we took it. I always remember coming here because Damon was next door working on Gorillas at the time, and I said to him, "Right, this is how we see it." And he sat there and he listened and he went, "Great, you got it. Definitely, we'll finish it off."
Oh, amazing!
And I went, "Okay." He said, "Do you want me to take over now and then finish it off?" I said, "No." I said, "I've taken it this far.
I want to see it through."
Because I hadn't worked with him for years. I've worked with Graham, but I hadn't worked with Damon since the Blur out.
Yeah.
I said, "Damon, I really want to produce the vocal. I want to work with you on it." I said, He said, "Absolutely fine, no worries at all." He said, "Come back in," because he was still finishing off some Gorilla stuff.
Yeah.
He said, "But once I've done that," he said, "I'm going to give you, January. I'm yours basically." And so I came in January and finished off the vocals, and then I mixed it with his engineer Steve.
And he actually went to Hong Kong to finish the lyrics.
He did. He wanted to go there to get some inspiration.
The position was in.
Yeah.
I love that.
He's great, Damon. He really. It's like when he does "He's Good, the Bad, and the Queen," he goes off to far-flung parts of the UK to get the vibe of a different, like Blackburn or Blackpool or or somewhere in the middle of Sussex or something. He will go somewhere to get. He's the hardest working guy. He's constantly.
I've never met him, but I've always had a great admiration.
He's got so much drive, and that drive is what kept Blur going
back
in the early days.